Hi everyone, welcome to the next instalment of BDI's vlog series. Today we're going to be talking about childcare. So really big topic that comes up very regularly. Obviously most of the doctors that we work with are coming across with family members as well. So whether that's a spouse or young children, specifically for the children, if you're working in a hospital all day, what are you going to do with them? Obviously if they're very, very young, they're not going to be able to look after themselves, and for a lot of time they might be in school. But what about the night shifts and the other hours that you work that don't quite fit around that schedule? So we're going to talk about the different options available for you and run through some of the pros and the cons. Okay, so the first option that you have in terms of childcare is to go down the route of getting a childminder. Now that's probably the most popular route that families will take, and a childminder basically becomes an extension of your family. So they don't live with you, but they might come in early and stay late to make sure that the children have had breakfast, make sure they're dressed, get off to school in time. They can do the school run, so dropping off, picking up, and then looking after them in that sort of middle period where they finish school. Maybe you haven't finished your shift yet at the hospital, so they'll make sure that they've had dinner if necessary, you know, get them ready for bed or whatnot, and stay until you get home. They usually can be found in local newspapers advertising. There are also a number of agencies that can refer childminders onto you, but you want to make sure that they've had a police background clearance, obviously to make sure that they're safe, and in England that they're registered with Ofsted, Scotland and Wales with the Health Inspectorate, and also in Northern Ireland with the Health and Social Services Trust. So just make sure that they're sort of regulated and safe. Obviously, if you're leaving your children with somebody, you want to be sure that they're, that they're all above board and that they've had a background check and whatnot. The other thing to bear in mind is that you would pay the childminder directly. So they're mostly self-employed, so they'll take care of their own taxes and deductions. So you just agree a fee with them, whether that's a sort of daily rate or monthly rate, and then you would pay them directly and they will take care of the rest. So pretty straightforward, really easy one. Positives of that obviously is that you get a lot of flexibility, and if you get to know a childminder over a period of time, it can become much easier to leave your children obviously while you're off at work. So your second option when it comes to childcare is a day nursery, and behind the childminder, especially if you've got young children, that is a very, very popular route to go down. Now luckily, some NHS trusts will have agreements with local nurseries, or they might have a nursery as part of the hospital, so that when you drive into work or go by train or however you get in, you can drop your kids off and then go straight to the department, and it means that they're pretty close by, that when you leave, obviously you don't have to go out of your way to pick them up before you go home. Day nurseries generally are open between 8 AM and 6 PM, so maybe not as flexible when it comes to sort of night shifts and working sort of unsocial shift patterns. But Monday to Friday, a really, really good option. That's personally what I use for my children when I'm not able to be there, my wife's not there. The cost is quite high, so they'll either be run by local authorities or by private sector organisations. They're all cleared. You can get ratings from Ofsted, so they're all rated depending on what they provide for the children and how the services are. And the cost is, for 50 hours a week, probably about £250 roughly per week. So you're looking at about £1,000 a month. It's quite a big outlay, but you will get more sort of educational activities and things to do than if you're leaving with a childminder who maybe isn't specifically trained in that kind of thing. In terms of the childminder and the comparative cost, there's not too much in it, but generally the nursery will be more expensive than the childminder because they're looking after the kids full time. But again, another good option, especially if you get a discount through the NHS and they have a local creche or nursery attached to the hospital. So kind of tying into the nurseries, you can also get a kind of preschool or nursery groups, and that's for kids who are maybe a little bit older, so between the ages of 3 and 5, maybe not quite starting school yet, but obviously still you want to leave them with somebody and get some sort of educational activity happening whilst you're away. Preschools can be attached to actual primary schools, or they can be attached to nurseries, and they're more sort of preparatory, so there's not any sort of set educational curriculum, but maybe they'll do games or activities which are more geared towards preparing them for school. Some of them have uniforms, for example, just to get them into the swing of things. And again, it can be full-time, so you can find preschools groups that will take kids on sort of Monday to Friday, but you can also break it down into sort of sessions of maybe 3 hours in the morning or 3 hours in an afternoon, and then pay by session rather than by term and by day. The one thing I would mention is that waiting lists for those places can be quite long because demand is very, very high. So if you do think that that's a route you're going to go down, start looking at it sooner rather than later. The other thing to bear in mind, as with the nurseries, is that during term time it's absolutely fine, but when you get to summer holidays, to Christmases, bank holidays, these places generally will close, and so you'll have to make alternative childcare arrangements. Right, so if your children are old enough to be in school, and we're talking specifically about primary school, although sometimes with secondary schools as well, you might have what's called an after-school club. So if you are working maybe a 9 till 5 or a 9 till 6 or 7, you might be able to do the school run and drop them off at the school in the morning, but because of the shift that you're doing and the days that you're doing, you might not be able to pick them up quite on time at 3 or 4 o'clock, whenever it is that they close. So an after-school club basically looks after the children for that extra period before you're able to pick them up, but after the actual school day finishes. So that can be a really handy filler just to get you through those last sort of 3 or 4 hours. Again, most schools will offer a school club, and it will cost an additional fee. It's not included as part of the government's schooling programme, but again, another very, very good option. Right, so if you're working really, really long hours and your partner or family members aren't there to help, you might consider a live-in nanny or an au pair. So a live-in nanny, similar to a childminder, is somebody who will look after the kids, do some cleaning, do some housework, make sure that everything's done, but they'll actually live in your house with you, so they'll be there 24/7. Again, they're employed by you, so you would pay them directly, or you can have an au pair. Now, au pairs generally will come from overseas, so it might be somebody from Europe, usually around sort of student age, who's looking to come and increase their English language skills, or just live in a different environment and do some travelling before they go on to the next part of their job. So au pairs and nannies, whilst they are sort of more consuming in terms of being there all the time and giving you lots of help, they are very expensive generally. Au pairs will be cheaper because they'll be looking for the experience, but a live-in nanny will be pretty expensive. You're looking at maybe £400 to £600 a week, so not a cost to be taken lightly. Right, so those are your childcare options generally. Obviously, if you're traveling with your family and you have a family member that's going to be working part-time or not working at all, the best thing you can do obviously is entrust that person to look after your kids. Obviously, you don't going to pay them anything, so it's going to be much, much cheaper, and they're already going to be familiar with that person. So, you know, for me, absolutely that's the best option. In terms of prices for all the different things that we've discussed, generally the closer you move to London, the more expensive it's going to be. Childcare costs are a really contentious issue in the UK. Obviously for some people they might decide actually it's cheaper to look after the children than it is to go to work. So it's a very personal decision, it's a very personal thing to consider. So make sure that you make the right decision based on what your needs are and what your sort of shift patterns are. But if there's anything else we can help you with, do please get in touch and stay tuned for our next vlog. Thanks.